The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Please say good morning and welcome to 710 KNUS in an ever-growing circle of people who get to ask the question, who in fact is Barack Obama? Dr. Jason Kissner is with us from American Thinker. Jason, good morning. I love your work. You're, again, part of that inner circle of people who ask these questions. Thank you for coming on the radio show, and good morning.
Good to be with you again, Peter.
Yeah, you too, brother. If you would, briefly for the audience, a little quick bio, and then I'd like to kick back and have you tell the audience what you believe, because no one knows, but what your belief is of what Barack Obama's true life story is. So if you would begin with a bio and then just roll into that.
Sure. Well, I'm a professor of criminology. Most recently, I've been doing empirical investigation of active shootings. And I've had a fairly long-standing interest as well in Mr. Obama's biography. So I've done quite a bit of research along those lines, primarily in terms of consuming various biographies that have been done, along with following intently numerous discussions online.
I have followed your work, and you have been with us and been in the round table, as we say, many, many, many times about this man. If someone were to say to you, Jason, what is your version of Barack Obama's life? And the other morning, this is maybe 3 weeks ago here on the show, we had Corsi, Jack Cashill, a number of people that you know, Joel Gilbert. And Gilbert's coming to town, by the way, with a new film, and Corsi's going to be here as well. And I'd love to have you here and do this roundtable as well. Everybody told their version of his life. You know what? No one told the same story.
Well, Peter, I think that there is a very simple explanation for the many different strange phenomena we've observed about Obama's background that comprehends both its obscurity as well as the fact that so many people have so many different points of view and much else besides. There's a very simple explanation for it, Peter, that I think is fully consistent with all of the evidence, that is simple and that makes abundant sense, but people simply do not want to acknowledge it. And the evidence is just right there for everybody to see. The way I would summarize it is to say simply that Mr. Obama is an intelligence product. That's why there's so much mystery about his background.
Example of what you mean.
Well, look at what his first job was out of Columbia. His first job was at an institution called the Business International Corporation. Now, in 1977, the New York Times outed the Business International Corporation as a CIA front. So his tenure at Columbia is largely a blank.
It really is.
It really is. Right, and he walks right out of there into Business International Corporation. And this is something that anybody can confirm for themselves in about 5 seconds at Google. So that, together with several other interesting aspects. I mean, his mother, Stanley Ann, of course, her involvement with the Ford Foundation in Indonesia.
She was.
Right, and the Ford Foundation has been linked by many researchers to CIA type activities.
They call them. They called those people. They called them fronts.
That's right.
You know, remember, Air America was the CIA airline, and it wasn't until a long time later till people figured that out.
That's exactly right.
The Rand Corporation. It's a CIA think tank. It's a CIA front.
That's right. And so the writing really is on the wall everywhere, so to speak, about why this person, Mr. Obama's background, is so strange. It's strange because it's by design, Peter.
But by design by whom? And this is, I mean, like there's that notion of something called the prime mover. Who's the prime mover in Barack Obama's life?
Well, I don't necessarily think it can be traced to a particular individual. When I suggested he's an intelligence product, what I really mean to suggest is that he's an institutional product. Now, Obama served many very powerful interests, institutionalized interests, very, very well. So it's most interesting to observe that in terms of his policy and in terms of behavior, in many cases, it's the mirror image of what many people believe he represents. So, for example, Wall Street has been completely immunized against Mr. Obama, right? I mean, Obama and Wall Street are about as tight as you can get.
No,
and
absolutely.
many people have,
absolutely.
And many people have the misperception that Wall Street is a Republican thing. And to some extent, that's true. But also to that extent, you basically have a one-party system.
Of course. We just got done talking about that. We've done some great work here by some folks, and great work by my colleague Mark Crowley showing a Romney connection, Romney's money, the money from Fat Cat GOPs in the state of Colorado attempting to destroy Tom Tancredo's run for governor. It wasn't the Democrats that are trying to destroy Tom. It's Republicans. And,
Rupert Murdoch probably isn't far behind, right?
Right. No, I mean, it's you and I see the world, I think, that way in very similar fashion. But because we got a limited time, you and I together, you have done this work on Ann Soetoro. And, of course, Ann Soetoro was Stanley Ann Dunham. She was never Stanley Ann Obama. They were never married. She becomes Stanley Ann Soetoro, and God only knows who else, because coming up, and I remember when Jerry Corsi was the first guy, and you did some great follow-up work on this name, and this name appears, Ibaka. And I remember when Jerry went to Indonesia, came up with that name. Oh my God! I was working at another radio station we call KHW. We call it Brand X, and that's when you and I first met. But I remember when Jerry came on the radio show that morning, he was the worst human being in the world. He was called a racist. He was called all these terrible things that he said that Barack. That he said, look, I can prove to you that the President of the United States has yet a third name, Ibaka, his last name on a document. You've done great work on this, so I'm going to turn that part of it over to you with the time we have remaining, and then we're going to do a big show on all of this when all these guys are in town, and you certainly will be part of it. So where do we see this strange name, Ibaka, turn up?
Right, so that turns up on Stanley N. Dunham, a Stanley N. Dunham passport renewal application, and it's a name that appears in parentheses next to Barack Hussein Obama. So nobody really knows, I think. Nobody can say with complete confidence, that is, what Ibaka means. We just know that it appears on his passport. It's very, very strange. It doesn't seem as though it would be a nickname, for example, because it just seems very odd that a nickname would be included on a passport renewal application, an official document like that. There's been some talk that it may be, linguistically speaking, indicative of Javanese origins, but that still doesn't explain why it's there.
I mean, do you, I mean, I know when I've spoken with Jerry, and say, who broke the story, I said, Jerry, what does Ibaka mean? And he's got three different answers of what it could mean. But regardless, I mean, is it fair to say this? We have Stanley Ann's 68 application to extend her 65 passport, but all of that paperwork and everything else has been destroyed, has it not?
Well, some of the information that would have been pivotal in determining more about what was going on has been destroyed. That's right. Now, it's been asserted that that was done as a matter of routine, but it certainly does seem that documents do seem to disappear. Hard drives do seem to disappear.
Yeah, hard drives disappear and emails disappear, right? But
emails disappear.
This is light years before there were hard drives and email. But Stanley Ann Soturo's 68 app to extend her 65 passport for 2 years, that's been destroyed.
Right.
But on this other page of the app, Stanley Ann moves to exclude. And is he Barack Hussein Obama? Is he Barack Ibaka? Is he Barack Soturo? Who is he then?
Well, that's unclear, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And there really doesn't seem to be any especially good reason that's been offered by Obama's defenders about why that name is even there. And it's somewhat interesting to me that given that that does seem to be anomalous, and that in spite of it being so anomalous, not a great deal of attention has been focused on it.
And plus, he's not an infant. He's, 7 years old now, isn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
And some have speculated that it may be indicative in some way or other of his having been adopted while he was in Indonesia.
That Lolo Soturo, because he's now 7 years of age, he lives in a foreign country, and he doesn't have any, as they say, paper on him. He's passportless. And what else would go with that?
Well, that's right, and I'm not fully confident in that interpretation really either, partly because it's not clear to me why the Barca part of that name would be suggestive of adoption. But what I would say in that regard, too, though, is why shouldn't we suppose that he was adopted?
Of course.
Why shouldn't we? That would seem to be the natural explanation, right?
But I believe that, well, of course, the school records for those schools, I think the one is the St. Francis School, but he is enrolled not as Barack Obama, he's enrolled as Soturo.
Right.
But then here comes this Ibaka name, and this sounds crazy, is it a name change? Is it a citizenship status change? Is it a religious conversion? Doctor, what is it?
Well, you know what, Peter? Nobody really knows. There are so many mysterious things about Obama's background, though. I think we could say a couple of things. One thing we could say is that even broken clocks are right twice a day.
Yeah, even a blind pig finds an acorn every once in a while, right?
Right, and so even if each individual case, there may be very good, innocent explanations.
I agree.
But enough of these different things accumulate, you have to start to wonder whether there may be something wrong at some point there along the background. Now, another thing related to all of these things, though, is, Peter, that, that Obama has some very, 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 very interesting relatives that have received almost no discussions in the media whatsoever.
Examples.
Well, if you look at Stanley Armour Dunham.
The dad, Big Stan, granddad.
The granddad, exactly, right?
Right.
He had a sister named Virginia.
Yep.
Well, his sister Virginia was married to somebody whose background is still available online in plain sight. And it's a very, 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 very interesting background, which traces to Arkansas, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
And it involves computer software that was used, many people suggest, to engage in money laundering for the intelligence agencies.
Now, this sounds, when you start to talk, in and of itself, it sounds crazy as, owl dung. On the other hand, when we look at this guy's life, you kind of shrug your shoulders and go, okay, why not, right?
Well, why not? And it's also factual in the sense that nobody can dispute what this fellow's relation to Obama was. His biography is still available online. he worked for Boeing. He worked in computer programming.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked on a program and for a company that was financed by an Arkansas billionaire that was doing some very interesting things with respect to banking. And so it's very interesting. This particular end of the family tree has received no discussion whatsoever.
I am like yourself and people that I have respect for, Cascio and Corsi and Joe Gilbert, and the list goes on and on and on. And I said, you know, one of the questions I have as we come to the end of this, I wonder what Donald Trump knows or doesn't know. I wonder what Arpaio is going to say or isn't going to say. And the third and final question, maybe more importantly, is given the fact that Barack Obama's presidency has become, not my choice of words, but others, a toxic presidency, will you and I ever see this thing break surface, this story that we have worked on or I've listened to?
Well, I really don't know, Peter, and I would say that people who have been looking into his background and are expecting something on the order of a criminal prosecution to fix things, I just don't think that's terribly realistic.
I agree. I agree.
The forces that brought Obama to power are very, very powerful forces. Yeah. They're very, very shadowy forces, and they're very, very institutionalized forces. I think what makes those forces so powerful, part of what makes them so powerful is that they've managed to create an American mythology, which in many senses means that much of what we've been told about American history in the last 100 years is completely false.
True.
And Obama is simply symptomatic of that. Obama is a manifestation of the unwillingness to demand accountability from government.
I like that.
For a very long period of time.
It's well said. Yeah, that he may be like, and I got to pause here, but, you know, I'm reading about how people identify themselves. It's some interesting psychology in politics. And, you know, we know how Jack Kennedy identified himself, FDR identifying himself, how Dwight Eisenhower identified himself, how he saw himself. And we can track that through his life from Abilene and West Point and the rest of it. I got no clue when it comes to this guy. Do you?
That's right.
I have no clue. I have no clue, Jason.
Well, but you know what? Maybe no clue is a sort of a clue, Peter.
No, and see what happens. As always, I hope. Well, I'm going to have you with us. We're going to and all the guys are coming to town, and we look like we can maybe get our round table together of the people who have looked at this. And your contributions to all of this are so important. And Doc, thanks, man. Have a good couple of days, and we'll talk ASAP. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right, good being with you again, Peter.
You too, brother. Thank you. Dr. Jason Kissner, American thinker.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.